Hey, welcome. Today we're doing something a little different. We're going to dive into a single newspaper article all the way back from February 1905. And it asks this huge question: what's next for Palestine? It lays out a vision for the Holy Land that honestly has been pretty much lost to history.
Right off the bat, this article does not pull any punches. It kicks off with this incredibly powerful line, and it just sets up this huge contrast. You've got this, legendary biblical image of a land that's fertile and prosperous. But then it slams you with the reality of 1905, calling it a waste. And boom, right there, that's the whole setup for the debate. It's this feeling that something really precious was lost and had to be brought back.
So this is the question the whole article is built around. And this wasn't just some, philosophical thought experiment. Nope, this was a real, urgent problem being argued about in the halls of power all across Europe. This single question is going to hang over everything we look at today. It's really the engine that makes this whole thing go.
All right, Section 1. To get a handle on the solutions they were kicking around, we gotta first see what things looked like on the ground, at least according to this article. It paints this picture of Palestine as a land just waiting, kind of in limbo, with its future totally up for grabs.
And here's the spark that lit the fire. The article talks about this new movement popping up in London, and their goal was, well, it was bold. We're talking revolutionary. They wanted to oust the Turks from the holy places, think Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and just start a whole new state from scratch. This wasn't some minor policy tweak. This was a call for a complete political reset.
Okay, Section 2. Now, a moment like this doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? To really get why such a huge change was even being considered, the article walks us back through some history to show us how we got here.
So here's the whirlwind tour of about 400 years. In 1516, the Ottoman Turks take over. Then for the next 300 years or so, the article describes this super chaotic time, just bloody fights between local sheiks. In 1840, the Turks finally put a stop to that, but other outside powers are starting to get interested. And check out that last point. The German Kaiser makes this big theatrical visit just 2 years before this article comes out. That's a huge signal that Europe is paying very close attention.
And this quote, wow, it just perfectly sums up the article's take on things. After almost 4 centuries of Ottoman rule, the final report card is not good. It's incredibly harsh. And that word, blight, it's so powerful. It's like a disease, something that's actively poisoning the land and holding it back. You have to understand that perception to get why the calls for change were so loud.
Section 3. Okay, so the stage is set, right? We have this land that's seen as neglected, oppressed, and now the article lays out 2 totally different paths forward. This is really the core of it, 2 competing ideas for what comes next.
All right, so here are the 2 options on the table. First, there's the idea of a Zionist state, a Jewish state. This wasn't a brand new idea. It had been talked about and even had some support from Britain. Then you have Proposal 2, a Christian state. And what's fascinating here is that this new idea is almost defined by what it isn't. It's not going to be a Jewish state, but it will welcome Jewish settlers. And the key thing, it's going to be neutral, with that neutrality guaranteed by all the big international powers.
So let's drill down on that first option for a second. The article presents the Zionist movement as this really powerful idea, born out of persecution and this ancient hope to rebuild the Jewish nation. It even mentions that the British had a strategic interest in it, thinking it could help protect their route to India. But here's the but. The article's verdict in 1905 is pretty blunt. It says that for all that ambition, it just hadn't sparked a great stream of Jewish immigration, and it was really struggling to get anywhere against Turkish oppression.
All right, Section 4. So, since the Zionist proposal was seen as having these major hurdles, the article spends a lot of time digging into the alternative, this idea of a new Christian state.
And this is where we get a really interesting peek behind the curtain. A huge reason for this proposal was to stop the constant fighting between different Christian groups, especially the Greek and the Latin churches. The article calls their quarrels not creditable, basically embarrassing. I mean, it even brings up a fight from 1901 over who got to sweep a flight of stairs at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Can you believe it? That's what was driving some of this.
So, you might be wondering, how would this actually work? Well, the idea wasn't for it to be a British colony or controlled by Russia or anyone else. No, the plan was for an independent state with permanent neutrality. And that neutrality would be backed by all the great powers. It was basically a vision for international oversight to make sure no one country could just take it over.
And they lay out the plan pretty clearly. Step 1, the big global powers guarantee its neutrality. Step 2, The number one most important rule is tolerance for all religions. Step 3, an international police force, they call it gendarmerie, would keep the peace. And finally, step 4, this whole setup would protect the holy places, stopping both actual damage and those silly arguments we just talked about.
Okay, section 5. Now, just when you're deep in the weeds of these huge political ideas, the article takes a hard turn. It ends with something that just snaps you right back to reality, to the desperate situation for actual people living there.
And it's such a jarring shift in tone. You have all these people in London debating borders and governments, and at the same time, on the ground, people, Christians, Jews, and Muslims, are literally starving. The article talks about an appalling measure of misery. It just adds this layer of real human tragedy to all the high-level politics.
But in the middle of this crisis, something pretty incredible was happening. A relief committee gets formed in New York to send help. And just look who was leading it. You've got Reverend D. Stuart Dodge, representing Christian missions, working side by side with Rabbi Stephen S. Wise from Jewish societies. I mean, how about that?
So think about this for a second. While all the political talk was about us versus them, a Jewish state or a Christian state, the actual humanitarian work on the ground was completely interfaith. You had Jewish and Christian leaders coming together, not to argue politics, but to ship food to help everyone, no matter their religion. It's this amazing, powerful little story that runs completely counter to the main political debate.
And that's where the article leaves us. It's just a snapshot, a little window into a moment where anything seemed possible. The future wasn't written yet. You had these huge competing political ideas floating around, right next to these incredible moments of people just helping people. So it really makes you think, doesn't it? How does seeing this one moment in time, with its unique hopes and its forgotten plans, change how we look at all the complicated and often painful history that came after?